Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I don't think we've ever shown you this pear tree. It's a lovely old conference pear that stands on the edge of the vegetable garden. And because conference are self-fertile, it's always covered with fruit. And this is their season. Towards the end of September, they do need harvesting. And I love pears, amongst my favourite fruits. But you can hardly ever buy a truly ripe pear, so they're perfect for gardeners to grow. And at this time of year, you want to check them almost daily and just feel them. Now, if then you bend them up and they snap away from the branch by the stalk, they're ready. Doesn't matter how hard or soft they are ready to be picked. Handle it carefully, take it indoors, put it on a windowsill, and then check them to see if they're ripe. And if they're ripe, they'll just be soft at the stem end. And then cancel everything and just devote yourself to eating that lovely, ripe, juicy pear. Now, yesterday was the autumn equinox, which means that today is officially the first day of autumn. And it's also a time of harvest. Right across the country, there'll be harvest festivals. And in today's programme, we shall be harvesting fruit, vegetables, herbs, cut flowers, and Joe and Carol will be taking cuttings and gathering seeds, which we shall be using for a brand new garden here at Berryfields in 2006. Any self-respecting vegetable garden aims to give you a harvest of some kind every single day of the year, but that's not what we're about at this time of year. What we're looking to gather in today are either those crops which will be spoilt by cold weather, and let's face it, it's autumn, the weather is going to get worse, and also there are crops which have reached maturity, they're ripe, and they need to be enjoyed at their very best. Now, peas are definitely coming to the end of their season, and of course what we love about peas, let's just pick one and show it, are these lovely tender green peas. There they are. That's the best thing to get now because they will be disappearing. They'll rapidly be going over. Lovely, really good. And these have only done so well because it's been a relatively mild summer and we've kept them well watered. Now, if you think of peas, if they are a little bit hard, they can be used for pea soup or mushy peas, and if they're really nice and sweet, you can freeze them very easily. There are two lots here. You can see that this is called Little Marvel and it's mildewy. The peas are fine and I shall certainly pick them. But this lot, which is Ambassador, sown on the same day in the same bed, don't seem to be suffering from mildew at all. So that's worth bearing in mind for future reference. And I shall leave these here until the leaves start to turn yellow and brown and then pull up the whole lot and keep any pods that are remaining for drying and either eating or using as seed. Now, you may remember that we underplanted our sweet corn with courgettes, and we've been harvesting those for the last couple of months and will go on harvesting them to the very last moment. But now is the moment for the sweet corn. This has been quietly growing up above the courgettes, developing its wonderful corns. Now, the reason why we grow sweet corn, as opposed to the maize you see in the fields, that it has this marvellous sweetness. And you'll know if they're ripe, because the tassel at the end is brown and drooping down. And then carefully just peel back the top of the outer sheath, and that should expose the cob inside, and just squeeze one of the grains. And if the juice is milky, then it's ripe. Now, don't pick it, because the whole point is to keep the period from picking it to cooking it as short as you possibly can. Have the water boiling, just break off a cob or as many as you need, straight back into the kitchen, peel them, pop them in the water, and that way you will capture that amazing sweetness. And like pears, you simply cannot buy that from a shop. You've got to grow it to really know it. Do you remember the carrots that I sowed for the container vegetable garden back in spring? They won't keep over winter, so it's time to harvest them. If there are too many to eat now, you can store them in a box or a container packed with slightly damp sand. I tell you what, this is a fabulous crop. I don't think I've ever seen better. And all from a little tin, perhaps 10 inches by 9. It just shows you what you can grow in a container. It's been a great year for outdoor tomatoes, as good a one as I've known for a long time. But there are always quite a few green ones left. However, that needn't be a disaster. You can just cut off the whole of a vine and then take that and put it in a drawer or in a bowl under a cloth. You can put a banana in it, which will help it ripen, and you'll find that quite a few will ripen in the dark. It may take weeks, but they'll be fine, and they will be ripe when you come to use them. And the ones that don't ripen, and inevitably with outdoor tomatoes, you're going to be left with a number of green ones. Don't worry, because green tomato chutney and even green tomato soup are delicious. This is a variety called Mirabelle. And have you ever seen so many tomatoes on one truss? It never fails to excite me digging potatoes. You put your hand in and you pull out magic. Now, these are main crop potatoes. And we can harvest these any time over the next month, but it's a good idea to do it on a dry day when you can get at the soil, and also you can leave the potatoes on the surface for a few hours to dry off, and that way they'll store much better. This is a variety called Sharpo Mara. It was bred in Hungary since before the Second World War from a particular strain taken from Mexico that was very resistant to blight, and that's its main claim, to be a healthy, vigorous, blight-resistant potato. Well, it certainly hasn't got blight this year. Mind you, there hasn't been much blight about, so it's not a real test, but we'll give it further tests in future years. But for an organic grower, a blight-resistant potato is gold dust. The best way to store them is in a sack. If you can get hold of Hessian sacks, that's ideal, or paper sacks, but not polythene or plastic, because they sweat and then they might well rot. If you can't get sacks, try and get some trays and store them in a cool, dark place. Now, however much you love potatoes, and however important they are, not many people would claim that they are the most beautiful of vegetables. However, we paid a trip to Harlow Carr, where all the vegetables are grown to look as attractive as possible.
Here at Harlow Carr, we treat the vegetable area the same as anywhere else in the garden. It's got to be very decorative, but it's also got to be productive. And we choose the varieties with that in mind. Vegetables should be a feast for the eyes as well as the table. I'm really passionate about vegetables. I'd really like people to grow them as well, but not feel that they've got to get into these great allotment situations or have a great complicated time for it. Just use a bit of bare earth that you've got and you can grow just about anything. We'll use a lot of pots in the garden. It's a great opportunity to use spaces that are occurring naturally throughout your herbaceous borders or shrubberies throughout the year. So we've actually got pots that we've sowed with vegetables, salads, and then as these are harvested or go over, we can have some more waiting to go in. Some of the pots will just sit on the surface, and some of them we'll put a little bit further back and sink them slightly so they get the benefits of keeping the roots cool and we don't have to do so much watering. In this bed we've chosen a combination of plants to give some height in the kitchen garden. The amaranth over here is a relation to the Love Lies Bleeding amaranth, but this is a grain plant. We've never grown it up here before, so we're going to be interested to see what happens with that. Sunflowers, of course, are great for the wildlife. They attract lots of bees, hoverflies, and later on when the seeds form, you get a crop, of course, of sunflower seeds that you can eat yourself. At the front here, we've got a beautifully coloured runner bean, and I think this combination works really well as a whole. Flowers are a great thing to have in the vegetable garden, of course. As well as looking attractive, they bring in lots of wildlife, and several are edible. For example, the borage flowers, the nasturtium, and also calendulas or pot marigolds. We'll
Well, just like the ornamental vegetable garden at Harlow Carr, here in the small town fruit garden, we try and make sure that there are not just good things to eat, but that the whole place looks beautiful all the time. And one of the things that looks best at the moment is these herbs. They look fantastic. And not only are they looking beautiful, but there are absolutely masses of things that we can harvest right now. This tarragon, for instance. This is one of the best herbs. It's French tarragon, and it's tender, so we need to cut it now if we're going to actually preserve it for the winter. And you just chop off nice big chunks. With any of these soft leaf herbs, tarragon and parsley, coriander, chives, all those things that are green and soft, the best thing to do is to freeze them. So pop them straight into a freezer bag. And the time of day you pick them is important too. You want to make sure that it's early in the morning, but when the dew's evaporated, but before all the volatile oils have been released, so they're packed with flavour. So while you're on your way to the freezer, why not take a few of these beautiful borage flowers with you? Now this is the white flowered form. Usually it's blue, but this is just as decorative. And all you do is just pull the top of the flower like that, and the whole thing will come out. So I'm going to collect a few of these now. And you can actually put those into ice cubes, into an ice cube tray, run some water on them and freeze them, and they make a lovely decorative addition to your Christmas drinks. One of the herbs you're often told to dry is rosemary, but frankly, why bother? This bush is going to stand like this all winter long, and any time we want to, we can come out and take a few shoots. Just look at all these lovely little shoots, and they're perfect for taking heel cuttings. Just pull them down, hold on to the stem firmly whilst you're doing it, and take them all with this little tiny heel here. I can't resist making new plants, but especially I would love to use some of these new plants in the brand new garden we're going to make here at Berryfields next year. And this is going to be a garden from our own seeds, cuttings, divisions, all of which have been collected within the garden. And it's all going to be for free. It's a really exciting project. So when you've got a handful of these cuttings, just take them back to the table. And it's a good idea to inspect them, and if any of them have got a long heel on them, that's a bit tatty. So just take a sharp knife and tidy that up. Now heel cuttings are particularly successful at this time of year because you've got a bit of a cambium layer exposed, which is the layer which actually makes the new roots. And also they shouldn't rot. This wood is quite firm there, although the top's fairly soft. So just trim some of these bottom leaves too, so that they're not in contact with the compost you put them into. And nip out the growing tip, because that will actually make the cutting bush out. And what you put them in is really important. You can buy a proprietary cuttings compost at the garden centre, but we like to make our own here, and we do it with 4 simple ingredients: horticultural grit, some horticultural sand, some peat-free compost and some loam in fairly equal proportions. So just tap it down firmly and level the compost off, and then just put your cuttings around the edge of it. We can probably fit about 10 or possibly even 15, as long as they're not actually touching one another around the edge of the pot. Now I've finished these off with some nice coarse grit. That'll aid drainage, and it'll also retain the moisture in the pot. And I'm going to water it well once, and that should be enough to keep it going. Always keep an eye on them during the winter, don't let them dry out. Now, if you haven't got a greenhouse, there are all sorts of other things that you can modify or use. This is an old fish tank, and it would be perfectly adequate for a couple of pots of cuttings. Or how about this for a really wonderful coal frame, incredibly cheap too. Now it's constructed from a non-returnable pallet. Make sure it is non-returnable, otherwise they'll be after you. It's ideal, I think. Again, you want to stand it in a nice sheltered place. And make the top out of any material that's see-through. That's the important thing, to get plenty of light in there. So we're going to sit our cuttings straight in there. It's lined with sand. You'll be perfectly happy in there for the winter. Now that's a few of my tips, but we went along to RHS Wisley to see what some of their propagating experts had to tell us.
My tip is to sow seed direct into the pot. Rather than doing what all too often I do, gather the seed, put it in a packet, put it in the refrigerator, promptly forget it for the next 3 months. This way you know that the seed has been sown fresh and straight from the plant. And don't forget to water it.
Once you've taken your cuttings, if you find that you don't have time to do them now, place them in a plastic bag and put them in the fridge. This keeps them turgid and moist so that you can then take the cuttings the next day.
And my top tip is, whenever doing any fruit propagation, you always need a very sharp knife. The best way to get it sharp is to use a leather strop, or this is an old bout actually I've mounted on a piece of wood. It is a no-cost solution to keeping your knife nicely honed. And when you have it sharp, you can just test it on a piece of wood.
There's some great tips there for propagating plants this autumn. Now just look at these long borders. They're fantastic, still going very strong. These delphiniums are looking glorious at the moment. This is their second flush. We cut them down after they first flowered, about late July, and they've come up with a vengeance. And they've got loads of flower heads on them and loads more buds, so loads more flowers to come too. But there's definitely a sense of autumn in the air in these long borders. We've got the golden hues creeping in and we've got seed heads forming, and we're going to leave most of those seed heads on the plants through the winter to attract the birds in so they can feed on them. And before the weather deteriorates too much, we need to gather those seeds, because next year we're creating a garden completely from seeds and cuttings from berry fields. So this is the perfect time of year to do it. I'm going to start with this red auroch. Now, you won't need any high-tech tools for this job. What you need is some brown paper bags or brown envelopes, and make sure you don't use the glossy ones, because actually they'll keep the moisture in, and what we're trying to do is take the moisture out and keep them nice and dry, so they're perfect. And then also, once they've dried out, we can put them in these old film canisters or jam jars, so start collecting these too. And one of the most important tools for the job is a pen, because we're going to label the bags first before we put the seed in it, so we know which one we've got. I've already labelled one here with red auroch, and this has to be especially dry. And what I'm going to do is literally just pull it off with my hand, just get the seed pods and the seeds in it, and I'll show you exactly how dry it is. And if I just pour some on my hand there, you can see the black seed are there in with the pods, and actually there's a lot of pods still full of seed as well, and when they get a bit drier they'll pop open and we can collect the seed. Seeds should only be collected once they're ripe. Signs of ripeness include splitting and opening of the seed pods or husks, and a darkening in colour of the seeds themselves. Not only can you see when seeds are ripe, but sometimes you can also hear it. Isn't that like mini maracas? Brilliant, aren't they? These oriental poppies are fabulous, and this poppy head is so cleverly designed. They've got a little cap on them which keeps the rain out, and at the same time they've got these holes to let the air get in there and circulate around and dry the seed and contain it all at the same time. Plants are clever, you know. And just to show you how many you get in one seed head, look at that, they're just pouring out, absolutely pouring out. Yeah, come and have a look at this. This verbascum, I was going to collect seed from the main stem, but if you look closely, you will see there are loads of ladybirds in here. It's like a ladybird hotel. So what I'm going to do is just take off a small section of one of these side shoots. I'm going to check first there's nothing alive on it. Well, that's okay. I'm just going to snip it about there, and that will have more than enough seed that I need for me. Oh, you can hear the seed going in there now. I'm going to leave that there for the ladybirds and the insects all winter. Now, here's a nice little tip. when collecting seeds from scabious, just get your thumb and rub it over the seed head, apply a little bit of pressure, and the ripe seeds will pop up and just pop out onto your hand like that. And there you go. And then I put them in a bag. And over the next couple of weeks, the seeds will ripen on the seed head, so I can periodically come back, check them, and pop them in the bag. This cardoon's still looking fabulous here, isn't it, Carol?
It is, yeah. It's really architectural, isn't it?
But I'm going to leave most of it on for the birds through the winter.
Yeah, because each one of those seed heads will give you, you know, scores of seeds.
Here's a good one.
And we don't need too many, do we? Because this one was big enough. These parachutes have just started to come off.
Yeah.
There's a seed, look on the bottom, there's a whole parachute.
Yeah.
And if you delve in here, there's loads and loads more seed. It's exciting, isn't it? Yeah. I'll let you have that, because I'm too vertically challenged for this. I think it's He-Man height, it needs you, Joe.
It needs a tall person. Well, I can tell you there's some fruits I won't let the birds anywhere near if I can help it, and that's our raspberries. I love raspberries. So much nicer than strawberries. And they're always a treat, whereas you can have almost too many of every other fruit. These are autumn raspberries, and it's a variety called Joan J. Not grown it before, it's a new one. We've also got the much more familiar Autumn Bliss. Now, Autumn Bliss is a really good, tasty raspberry, and I'd certainly recommend it to anyone. But the potential advantages of Joan J are that it's thornless, it's got a longer fruiting season, and has larger fruit. Well, it tastes good too, but then to me, all raspberries taste good. But certainly, if it's as good as Autumn Bliss, it'll be well worth growing. Now, there are two types of raspberry. There are summer fruiting and autumn fruiting. Summer fruiting produce their fruit on the previous year's canes. Autumn fruiting produce the fruit on the current season's canes. And we've planted some summer fruiting here at Berryfields, but we did so this year, so there are no fruit, because it won't be till next year that this year's growth provides us with fruit to harvest. But the beauty of autumn fruiting is all you have to do is at Christmas time cut everything above ground, flush to the ground, and that's it. They then grow up next year and produce their fruit. So looking after them is a doddle. And when it comes to harvesting, the greatest problem, and this can be quite serious, is not eating too many before you get back to the kitchen. And you're looking for a nice ripe fruit. That one, for example, is a little bit overripe. Pull it off and it can disintegrate, but makes perfect jam, even if they're very mushy, so don't leave them behind for the birds. But if you get a really ripe fruit like that one, you should be able to just pull gently and it leaves behind that little white cone. If it doesn't come off easily, it's not ripe yet. Now, while I'm picking the raspberries and trying to resist eating them, let's go to Sheffield. Because Sheffield and Carbis Bay and St Ives in Cornwall have all taken part in Entente Florale, which is quite similar to our own RHS Britain in Bloom competition, but it's between 11 different countries right across Europe. Only last week the winners were announced, but it was back in July that a team of European judges visited the UK entries.
Entente Florale is all about getting people who live in towns and cities involved in bringing nature back into their towns and cities in the shape of trees and plants and green spaces, parks, flowers, colour, cheerfulness, gaiety, all of that.
Cities and towns from the Netherlands to Slovenia have competed fiercely to reach the gold standard and prove that they are the best in Europe.
Entente Florale's all about, for me, the city showing itself off to the rest of Europe. We're really proud that we're the biggest city that's ever been involved in Entente Florale.
Towns do improve their tourism. They generally improve their own lot as well, and they generally feel that they are living in a more coherent community as a result of it.
Now, each entrant was rigorously judged, but not just on its floral displays.
The marking is done on the basis of set criteria that range from attention to the environment, public participation, a planned approach, cleanliness, attention to tourism and those sort of things. Now, you must be excellent in each one of those criteria, and if one, as it were, lets you down, then you're unlikely to get gold.
After months of hard work around the city, Sheffield set their sights high.
Very pleased with how we've done. I'm very proud of the city, along with everybody else. I think we've done really well. It's a fantastic city and we deserve to win gold.
Well, Sheffield certainly is a fantastic city, and it did fantastically well. It won gold, as did St Ives and Cardiff Bay, and that ranks all three with the very best in Europe. Now, not even I would admit that these dahlias rank with the best in Britain, let alone Europe, but they have given us huge amounts of pleasure as cut flowers. And that's what we grow them for, and have done so for the last 2 or 3 years. They've nothing to do with our dahlia trial. We grow them just for decoration indoors. And they look fantastic. Now, if you don't grow dahlias, here's some other jobs you can be getting on with this weekend.
Now's the time to get rid of old summer bedding in containers and hanging baskets that have gone way past their best. And don't forget, you can compost the lot, roots and all.
I'm afraid it's a fact that the nights are now getting longer and colder. So it's time to bring in any tender plants, succulents or house plants that we've had in containers outside. The important thing to do is to give them protection now before any frost comes and damages them.
You may have noticed an abundance of daddy longlegs this year. Although they do no harm, leather jackets, which are the larvae of the daddy longlegs, do. They feed on the roots and stems of many different plants, but especially the grass in your lawn, causing brown patches. An organic solution is to apply nematodes.
Now, I know we're not giving the results of the pumpkin trial for a couple of weeks, but you can't have a true harvest festival without a decent pumpkin, and I'll make lovely pumpkin soup. Now, there's still time to contact us with the results of your own pumpkin trial, and you can do that either by emailing us at pumpkins@bbc.co.uk, or you can go to our website and follow the instructions there, or write to us at Pumpkin Trial, BBC Gardener's World, Birmingham, B11RF. And however you contact us, please put your telephone number in too if you'd like us to come and film your pumpkins. The more we hear from and the more we can come and see, the better.
Well, here's some seed that I harvested earlier.
I couldn't resist cutting these dahlias, and I've been taking cuttings all day long for our new garden.
Yeah, the seed and cutting garden we're doing next year.
It looks so colourful, but I think there's one thing that's given me more pleasure than anything else, are the carrots which have come from one container from the container veg garden.
Wow, there's really loads in there.
Loads, and they're all perfect too, absolutely perfect. Right. And how about that for one truss of tomatoes?
Yeah. Just one truss.
Oh, I'm going to have a taste.
Oh, and have a taste, and I hope to ripen off the green ones before we're done. I love all the colour. Really superb.
It is fabulous, isn't
it? It is great. Right, come on. Let's get some of these potatoes
work to be done
in a bag.
Now, don't forget that tomorrow starts British Food Fortnight, so the best thing you can do to celebrate that is go out and buy something local. Now, next week we'll be back at our normal time, and Sarah will be with us then, where we'll be concentrating mainly on the dry garden. So see you then. Because yesterday was the autumn equinox, from today the nights are getting longer, and that means it's going to get colder. And it'll be a chilly start tomorrow morning with frost in certain areas. It will warm up to make a nice sunny day in most areas, although it could be a bit showery in the far north of Scotland. Sunday will start cold too, and then the winds will build to bring rain to western and central districts, although that should fizzle out by the time it reaches the east.